My dad laughed when Grandpa left me a broken old house and a $10 bill. He thought I had inherited nothing. But that tiny bill carried the number to the secret he buried for years. And once I followed it, his perfect lie started falling apart. My name is Nola Kettner, and I was 32 the afternoon my father laughed at me in a lawyer's office like my grandfather had played one last joke on my life. We were sitting in a narrow room above the county courthouse in Red Glass, Kentucky, waiting for Orrin Kettner's will to be read. My grandfather had been gone for 9 days. I still had the smell of his old farmhouse in my coat, dry wood, cold dust, and the faint sweetness of apples that had not grown right in years. My father, Brant Kettner, sat across from me with his arms folded and a smile already waiting on his mouth. My stepmother, Maveen, had one hand on his sleeve like she was holding back a man too important to be bothered. My half-brother Callum kept checking his phone under the table. They all expected the same thing. They expected land. They expected control. They expected me to receive a polite sentence and maybe a box of old photographs nobody wanted. Then the attorney cleared her throat and said Grandpa had left me the North Orchard house on Orchard Line Road, plus one $10 bill sealed in a small envelope. My father stared at the attorney for 1 second, then threw his head back and laughed. "He gave you a dead house and lunch money," he said. "That old man played you until the end." Everyone in that room smiled except the attorney. I did not argue. I picked up the envelope, felt the soft paper bill inside, and said thank you. What none of them knew was that my grandfather had spent my whole childhood teaching me that numbers were never just numbers. 2 days later, I would understand that the old house was not the joke. The $10 bill was not the gift. It was the first door in a trail my father had spent years trying to bury. Welcome back to Slow Revenge Stories, where quiet people do not always answer in the moment, because sometimes the truth needs a little time to find its own voice. If you have ever been laughed at by people who thought they knew the whole story, stay with me. This one begins with an old house, a cheap bill, and a father who smiled too early. The attorney's name was Tessa Rookland, though that day she was not my attorney yet. She had handled small estate matters for families all over Carter County, and she had the calm face of a woman who had watched relatives fight over dishes, land, tractors, and old grudges until nothing shocked her anymore. Her office had one long table, one wall of file cabinets, and a window that looked down toward Main Street, where people passed under red brick buildings without knowing someone's family was breaking apart above them. She read the will slowly. Grandpa left a small savings account to pay final bills. He left his truck to a neighbor who had helped him after his hip surgery. He left his tools to the county trade school. He left my father exactly one line. "To my son Brant, I leave the lesson he refused while I was alive." My father's face tightened, but he said nothing then. Callum received nothing by name, which made his jaw move like he was chewing glass. Maveen received a polite sentence thanking her for the kindness she performed in public. Then Tessa reached me. "To my granddaughter Nola Kettner, I leave the North Orchard house, the land legally attached to it, and the enclosed $10 bill. She will understand why." That was when my father laughed. I had been laughed at by my father before. Not always loudly. Sometimes it was just a breath through his nose when I said I liked working with records. Sometimes it was the little smile he gave Callum when I corrected a date or remembered an old family detail. Brant believed loud men built the world and quiet women filed the papers after. He had spent my whole life making sure I knew my place. Callum was the future. Callum knew property. Callum knew deals. I knew file folders, old signatures, and where the county kept vaccine records from 1987. I worked at the Carter County Health Department as a records clerk, and twice a week I helped the courthouse archive office sort old public files. It was not glamorous work, but I liked it. Records did not flatter you. They did not pretend. They sat in boxes and waited for someone patient enough to read them correctly. Grandpa Orrin had understood that about me. He was the only person in my family who never told me I was too quiet. When I was little, he would sit me at his kitchen table with old parcel maps and a pencil. He would point to a line and say, "Land tells the truth longer than people do." Then he would make me follow the boundary with my finger until I could see how a whole story could hide inside one crooked line. The North Orchard house had been in the Kettner family for 3 generations. It sat 6 miles outside Red Glass, past the closed grain co-op and the creek bridge, where the road turned narrow and the trees grew close enough to scratch both sides of a truck. When my grandfather was young, the orchard behind it had been known for late apples that stayed firm into winter. By the time I was grown, the trees were thin and bent, and the house looked like it had spent years holding its breath. A storm had damaged the roof. The front porch leaned. The old barn had burned 6 years earlier, and the family story was that lightning took it. My father had repeated that story so many times, nobody questioned it. "There's nothing out there but rot," he would say. Dad just couldn't let dead things go. But Grandpa never spoke of the house that way. To him, the old place was not dead. It was waiting. He kept tax receipts in labeled folders. He kept hand-drawn maps in mailing tubes. He kept little jars of dirt from each row of the orchard because he said soil remembered what people forgot. I thought that was just how old men loved land. I did not know he had been building a witness. After the will reading, my father followed me into the hallway. He had wiped the laughter off his face and replaced it with something that looked almost kind, which was always more dangerous. "Nola," he said, lowering his voice, "don't get sentimental about that place. Your grandfather was confused near the end. That house is a burden." Maveen stood behind him, wearing soft perfume and a worried expression that never touched her eyes. Callum leaned against the wall, thumbs moving across his phone. My father reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded business card. "I know a buyer. Cash. Quick. You sign, you walk away clean before taxes and repair bills eat you alive." I looked at the card. The name printed on it was Drex Halverson. Halverson Ridge Development. I had heard that name at the courthouse archive. Drex had been buying old farms around Red Glass for the last 2 years, turning pasture and timber into luxury cabins for people from Nashville and Louisville who wanted country peace with private roads and gate codes. I asked my father why a developer would want a dead house. He gave me a flat look. "Because he can tear it down." That was his answer. It came too fast. I did not take the card. I told him I needed time. Callum laughed under his breath and said, "Don't pretend you understand land deals, Nola. Just don't make everyone clean up your mess later." Maveen touched my arm and said, "Sweetheart, your grandfather would not want you buried under that place." The word buried stayed with me. People use strange words when fear speaks before they can stop it. I walked out of the courthouse with the envelope in my coat pocket, and the feeling that the smallest thing in that room had just become the heaviest. I sat in my car without starting it. Through the windshield, I watched my father and Callum stand near the curb, talking close. Maveen looked back once toward my car, and when she saw me watching, she smiled like a person closing a curtain. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the envelope. The $10 bill was old but not damaged, soft at the folds, with a small pencil circle around 3 digits in the serial number. At first, I only stared. Then a memory came up so sharply it felt like Grandpa had put his hand on my shoulder. I was 10 years old, sitting beside him on a hot June afternoon while he taught me how county parcel numbers worked. "People think land is just land," he had said, drawing boxes on a paper napkin. "But every piece has a name if you know how to read it." He had shown me section numbers, parcel letters, old survey dates, and correction codes. I had forgotten the details, or I thought I had. But the circled digits on the bill made something in my mind open. 14. C. 98. The numbers were not random. They looked like an old parcel reference. Parcel 14C, a boundary correction from 1998. The kind of file that would be stored in the courthouse basement, not online, because Red Glass was the sort of town where history still lived in metal drawers and cardboard boxes. I did not sleep much. By 8 the next morning, I was in the courthouse archive room with a visitor badge clipped to my sweater. Because I volunteered there, nobody thought it was strange to see me. I asked for the old survey index for Orchard Line Road. The clerk on duty, a young man named Sutter, pointed me toward the basement shelves and warned me the 1990s correction files were incomplete. Some of those boxes got moved after the flood, he said. Good luck. I pulled the thick index book down and turned the pages carefully. Orchard Line Road, Kettner, North Orchard. Parcel 14C. There it was. Boundary correction request, 1998. The file number matched the pattern from the bill. My hands went cold, not because I was afraid, but because I knew my grandfather had left me a map no one else in my family would have cared enough to read. I filled out the request slip and waited. Sutter came back 20 minutes later with no file in his hands. That one's missing, he said. There's only a checkout card. He slid a yellowed card across the counter. The file had been checked out 14 years earlier and never returned. The signature on the card was not neat, but I knew it. Brant Kettner. My father had taken the exact file my grandfather's $10 bill pointed me toward. He had taken it years before Grandpa died. He had never brought it back. I stood there looking at his signature while the courthouse basement hummed around me. My father had laughed because he believed I got junk, but he had once cared enough about that junk to remove a public record from a courthouse drawer. I drove to the North Orchard house that afternoon. The sky was low and gray, and the gravel road had puddles where the county never bothered to fill the dips. From the outside, the house looked exactly like my father wanted everyone to see it. Peeling paint, sagging steps, one upstairs window patched with plywood. The black square where the barn used to stand still marked the back field. But when I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the house felt less abandoned than guarded. The furniture was old but covered. The floor was swept. The kitchen cabinets had labels in Grandpa's square handwriting: flour, spare keys, seed catalogs, tax bills. 3 umbrellas stood in a ceramic stand by the back door, and inside one of them were rolled survey maps tied with blue string. I smiled before I could stop myself. Grandpa had always liked hiding important things in places people looked at but never saw. I spent 4 hours inside that house. I photographed every room. I opened drawers and wrote down what I found. In the dining room, an old wall calendar still hung from the year before Grandpa died. Several dates were circled in red, but none were birthdays or doctor appointments. They were courthouse dates. In the sitting room, a faded county map had been framed crookedly, and when I lifted it from the wall, there was a small mark on the back. Line first, story second. That was Grandpa's voice. I checked the cellar door and found it locked, but not with the key from the ring Tessa had given me. It had an inside slide bolt, which made no sense unless someone had wanted the cellar closed from below at some point. I found a loose stone near the base of the old chimney after tapping around like Grandpa had taught me when I was a child looking for hidden nails in barnwood. Behind it sat a metal seed box, rusted at the corners, wrapped in oilcloth. Inside the seed box was the first true proof: a copy of an insurance claim from 6 years earlier. A photograph of the barn before it burned, with 3 pieces of equipment parked in front. A second photograph, dated 4 months before the fire, showing those same machines on a flatbed trailer outside town. A survey map with a thin strip of land marked in red, and a note from Grandpa written on plain paper. If they call the house worthless, ask why they need it gone. I read that line 3 times. Then I sat on the cold cellar stairs and looked at the insurance claim. My father had submitted it after the barn burned. The claim listed equipment destroyed in the fire. But if the dated photograph was real, that equipment had been sold before the fire happened. The barn fire had not only paid someone money, it had created an excuse for missing records, missing tools, and missing history. My father called before I left the property. I let it ring twice, then answered. "Have you thought about the buyer?" he asked. "No, hello. No, how are you holding up?" "Just the buyer." I looked out the kitchen window toward the black patch in the field where the barn had stood. "Not yet," I said. "I'm still going through Grandpa's things." A silence opened on the line. "There's nothing to go through," he said. "Old receipts and mouse nests. Don't dig around and make yourself sad." The word dig landed hard. I said I would call him later and hung up. 10 minutes after that, Maveen texted, "We just worry about you alone in that unsafe house. Your father wants peace. Let us help." Then Callum texted a photo of a repair estimate for roof work I had never requested, followed by, "This is what you're getting into. Be smart for once." I saved both messages. I had spent years working with records. One message meant little. A pattern meant something. The next week became a quiet investigation. I still went to work. I still answered phones at the health department. I still helped people find birth certificate forms and vaccination copies. But every lunch break, every evening, every hour I could steal, I followed Grandpa's trail. I searched public business filings and found that Halverson Ridge Development did not directly own the land behind North Orchard. A small company called Linegate Holdings had purchase options on several connected parcels. Linegate's registered agent was a law office in Lexington, but one old filing listed a contact email using Callum's private domain. That made my stomach tighten. I printed everything. I checked tax maps. I compared old road access notes. The thin strip Grandpa marked in red was not large. It looked like nothing, just a narrow piece of land running beside the old creek path. But on the map, it connected Orchard Line Road to the larger back acreage Drex Halverson wanted. Without that strip, there was no clean private road. Without the road, the cabin development became expensive, delayed, maybe impossible. And the North Orchard house sat right where that problem began. I needed someone who remembered the old files before they went missing. That led me to Blythe Caro, the retired county recorder. She lived in a brick house near the Baptist church, with wind chimes on the porch and newspaper stacks visible through the front window. When I called, she said my grandfather's name and went quiet for long enough that I knew she knew something. She invited me over the next morning. Blythe was in her 70s, thin as a fence rail, with silver hair pinned tightly and eyes that missed nothing. I brought copies, not originals. Grandpa had taught me that too, even if I had not understood it as a lesson at the time. Blythe looked at the survey map, then at the missing file card, and her mouth pressed into a hard line. "Your grandfather came to me about this," she said. "He was worried someone had changed a boundary correction without his consent." I asked who. Blythe looked toward the window before she answered. "He did not accuse at first. Orrin was careful. He said his son was pushing him to sign development papers, and he wanted to know why a strip of land he never sold was showing differently on a corrected map." She tapped the red strip with one finger. "This piece gave road access. Most people would never notice it. A developer would." I showed her the checkout card with my father's signature. She took off her glasses, wiped them, and put them back on. That file had the original correction request and the attached survey notes. If it disappeared, someone wanted the first version gone. She agreed to write a statement about what she remembered, but she warned me memory was not enough. "You need documents," she said. "Your grandfather knew that better than anyone." I almost laughed then, not because it was funny, but because Grandpa's whole voice seemed to be moving through every person who had ever respected him. The public shame came 3 days later at Maribel's diner, because my father never wasted a stage. I stopped there after work to pick up soup, and he was already in a booth near the middle with Callum and 2 men from the county planning board. I saw him see me. I saw him make his choice. "Nola," he called, loud enough for the waitress and half the room to look up. "Come sit. We're all trying to understand why you're tearing up your grandfather's memory over a house he didn't even know how to manage." My face went hot. Callum leaned back, smiling. My father shook his head with practiced sadness. "Grief makes people do strange things. She thinks every old paper is a treasure map now." Poor Oren filled her head at the end. He wasn't himself. There it was. In one sentence, he made Grandpa confused, me greedy, and himself reasonable. The old men at the counter looked away. The waitress froze with my soup bag in her hand. I wanted to throw the insurance papers on the table. I wanted to say the word forged so loudly every coffee cup shook. Instead, I paid for my soup, looked at my father, and said, "I hope you remember saying that." Then I walked out with my hands steady and my throat burning. In my car, I wrote everything down. Date, time, names of people present, exact words as best as I could remember. I had learned long ago that humiliation tries to blur itself. If you write it down quickly, it stays sharp. That night, I made 3 sets of copies of everything I had found. One stayed with me. One went into a small fireproof box under my bed. One went to a safe deposit box in my own name at the bank in town. I did not call my father. I did not answer Callum's laughing text asking if I was done playing detective. I did not explain myself to Maveen when she sent, "Your father is heartbroken." I simply added each message to the file. My family liked noise. I was starting to prefer paper. I found Tessa Rooklin's number on the will documents and called her office the next morning. I told her I needed legal advice about the property I had inherited and possible fraud connected to old land records. There was a pause, then her assistant scheduled me for that afternoon. Tessa listened for nearly 40 minutes without interrupting. She read the missing file card. She read Blythe's statement. She read the insurance claim and the photo of equipment sold before the barn fire. She studied the red strip on the map and then looked at me over the papers. "This is not a family disagreement," she said. "This is a title problem, a possible fraudulent transfer issue, and maybe an insurance fraud referral." I'm going to say maybe because careful language matters. I nodded. I liked her immediately for not promising me a movie ending. She explained that the first goal would be to stop any sale or transfer connected to the house and access strip. That meant a civil petition and possibly an injunction. The second goal would be to reconstruct the original boundary record. The third would be to refer the insurance claim to someone who knew that world better than she did. "Will it be fast?" I asked. Tessa almost smiled. "No, and anyone who tells you it will be fast is selling you comfort." She leaned back in her chair. "But your grandfather gave you a stronger start than most people get. You have a missing public record tied to your father, a disputed boundary that benefits his side, a development company with a connection to your brother, and an insurance claim that deserves a professional look. That is not nothing." I thought of my father laughing at lunch money. "He called it nothing," I said. Tessa looked down at the $10 bill, which I had placed in a clear sleeve on her desk. "Then, he should have left it alone." Tessa sent me to Jonas Pelham, an independent insurance investigator she trusted. Jonas had a quiet office between a tax preparer and a dentist in a town 40 minutes away, which was exactly the kind of distance I wanted from red glass gossip. He wore a plain blue shirt and did not waste words. He reviewed the barn fire claim, the equipment list, and Grandpa's photographs. Then he asked a question that made the room feel smaller. Who benefited from the fire besides the person who received the payout? I said the fire had supposedly destroyed old property records stored in the barn. Jonas looked up. Convenient. He did not say more, but he did not need to. Over the next 2 weeks, he confirmed what Grandpa had already suspected. The equipment listed as destroyed had been transferred before the fire. The payout had gone through my father, then into a repair account, then into payments connected to Linegate Holdings. It was not a clean line, but it was a line. And lines were what Grandpa had taught me to follow. The second big clue came from the house itself. I was in the sitting room on a rainy Saturday, trying to decide what could be repaired and what needed to be replaced, when the old wall clock stopped. It had hung there my whole life, a dark wooden thing with a brass pendulum and a face scratched near the number 4. I opened it to wind the mechanism and found a folded invoice taped behind the clock face. The date matched another set of digits in the $10 bill serial number, the ones I had not used yet. The invoice was from a surveyor named Harlan Voss, paid by Grandpa 18 months before his death. Taped behind it was a sealed copy of the survey report. My hands shook as I opened it. The report compared the original deed, the disputed 1998 boundary correction, and a current field survey. Its conclusion was written in plain language. The correction moving the access strip away from North Orchard was not supported by the original property description. In simple words, the line had been changed without a valid basis. Grandpa had not just suspected fraud, he had commissioned proof. I sat on the floor beneath that clock and cried for the first time since the funeral. Not loud, not pretty. Just a tired, broken sound I had been holding back while I worked and copied and drove and pretended I was made of clean folders and steady hands. Grandpa had known he might not live long enough to finish the fight. He had known my father would laugh. He had known I would look closer if he gave me a reason. That love hurt more than the betrayal. My father had spent years seeing me as small. Grandpa had spent years preparing something only I could open. One man looked at my quiet and saw weakness. The other saw the exact tool the truth would need. If you have ever been called too quiet while you were the only one paying attention, you understand what that moment did to me. I was not suddenly fearless. I was still scared. I still woke up at 3 in the morning thinking about court costs and family lies and my father's face in the diner. But fear is different when you know you are not imagining things. Fear becomes a hallway, not a wall. You still have to walk through it, but at least now you know where the door is. When my family realized I was not going to sell quickly, they changed shape. Callum started with threats. He left a voicemail saying he had investors, deadlines, and lawyers who would bury me in paperwork if I interfered with a lawful development project. He used the word lawful too many times, which made it sound less lawful every time. Maveen came to the house with a casserole I did not ask for, and tears she had practiced in the car. She stood in Grandpa's kitchen, looking around like the cabinets might accuse her. "Your father made mistakes," she said softly. "But he is still your father. You do not want to be the daughter who ruins him over old land." I asked her if she knew about Linegate Holdings. Her face changed so quickly she might as well have answered yes. Then she said, "Men handle complicated things. Sometimes wives sign what they are told to sign." For one moment, I saw something real in her. Not innocence, not exactly guilt. More like a person who had spent years choosing not to know, and now wanted credit for being afraid. I told her I was sorry she was scared. I also told her I would not stop. She left the casserole on the counter and never asked why I threw it away. My father came alone 2 nights later. I was on the porch, sorting through a box of Grandpa's old seed catalogs, when his truck came up the gravel drive. He got out slowly, not angry at first. That worried me more. He looked older in the porch light, his face lined in ways I had not noticed when I was busy being hurt by him. "Nola," he said, "this has gone far enough." I did not invite him inside. He looked past me anyway, toward the rooms where he imagined proof might be sitting in open boxes. Your grandfather was bitter. He hated that I wanted progress. He filled your head with his old fears. I said nothing. He stepped closer. Callum has a future tied to this. You want to punish your brother because an old man gave you a rotten house? That was when I understood the shape of his love. He had not come to ask what was true. He had come to tell me whose future mattered. Callum's future was a project. Mine was an obstacle. He left me the house, I said, and the land legally attached to it. My father's eyes narrowed at the word legally. You don't know what you're talking about. I looked at the orchard behind him, dark rose under a cloudy sky. Then why are you here? He opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, the loudest man in my life could not find a sentence that helped him. He pointed one finger at me, not touching, but close enough that I could smell coffee on his breath. Be careful, he said. Paper can cut both ways. I looked at his hand and thought of the missing courthouse file, the insurance claim, the false line on the map. I know, I said. Grandpa taught me. Tessa filed the first petition before my family invited me to the peace meeting. That was important. By then, we had enough to ask the court to stop any transfer or sale involving the house, the access strip, or any connected development claim until the boundary issue could be reviewed. We also sent a referral packet to the state insurance fraud unit through Jonas's contacts. Tessa warned me again that none of this meant instant victory. It meant the machine had started. It meant my father could no longer solve the problem by making me feel small. A judge would see paper before he heard family stories. My father had always won in rooms where people cared about confidence. We were moving the fight into rooms where confidence had to bring exhibits. The invitation came from Mavine by text, then from my father by phone. They wanted a family meeting at Tessa's office, though they did not know Tessa now represented me. My father called it a chance to resolve Grandpa's confusion like adults. He said his attorney would bring simple documents so everyone could move on. I asked who would be there. He said himself, Mavine, Callum, Drex Halverson, and someone neutral to handle paperwork. I almost smiled at the word neutral. They wanted the same kind of room as the will reading. A table. Witnesses. Pressure dressed as concern. My father believed if he could get me sitting alone across from all of them, he could make me the child again. He did not know I had already become my grandfather's final filing system. Tessa did not like the meeting at first. You do not owe them a performance, she said. We can communicate through counsel. I told her I knew that. But the room mattered. My father had laughed in that office because he wanted everyone to see me receive nothing. He had shamed me in a diner because he wanted the town to see me as unstable. I did not need revenge in the loud way. I did not need tears or a speech. But I wanted him to hear the truth in front of the people he had been performing for. Not because it would change him. It would not. Because silence has its own record, and I wanted that silence witnessed. Tessa studied me for a moment, then nodded. Fine, she said. But we do it my way. You speak very little. You do not accuse beyond what the documents support. And if anyone threatens you, we leave. That sounded exactly right. The morning of the meeting, I placed the $10 bill in a clear sleeve and put it on top of the packet. Beneath it were copies of the missing checkout card with Brandt's signature, the 1998 index page, Blythe's signed statement, Grandpa's marked survey map, Harlan Voss's independent survey report, the insurance claim, Jonas's preliminary findings, the Linegate Holdings filings, the old photographs of equipment sold before the fire, Callum's email connection, and the court-stamped petition Tessa had filed. It was not every answer. It was not a perfect ending tied with ribbon. It was enough. Grandpa had not left me certainty. He had left me direction. I dressed simply, tied my hair back, and drove to Red Glass with the packet on the passenger seat and the old house key in my pocket. The orchard trees were bare along the road, their branches lifted like hands that had finally stopped begging. It was the same long table, the same window, the same courthouse sounds rising from the street below. My father sat with his back to the wall like a man expecting to control the exits. Maveen sat beside him, pale under her makeup. Callum wore a navy jacket and the impatient face of someone already spending money he did not have. Drex Halverson sat near the end, thick-necked, polished, and annoyed to be in a family matter that had become inconvenient. Their attorney, a man named Lyle Fenton, had a folder so thin it almost made me sad for him. When I walked in with Tessa, my father's smile faded. He looked from me to her and understood one thing too late. I had not come alone. Lyle began with a speech about efficiency, family peace, and avoiding unnecessary court involvement. He slid a packet toward me. A sale agreement, a quitclaim deed, a release of claims, a confidentiality clause. They were offering me money, more than they thought I deserved, and less than the land was worth to them. My father leaned forward, soft voice ready. "Nola, this is generous. You get a clean start. Callum's project stays alive. Drex takes the liability. Everybody wins." Callum added, "It's the adult choice." Drex did not speak. He was watching Tessa read the first page, and something in his expression told me he was the only one in that group who truly understood how bad surprises could get. I did not touch their pen. I opened my folder and placed my packet on the table. The room changed before anyone read a word. Paper has a sound when it lands with purpose. I put the $10 bill on top, smoothing the sleeve with 2 fingers. My father looked at it and gave a short laugh, but it died without support. Nobody joined him this time. I looked at him and said, "You laughed because Grandpa left me $10. You should have asked why he chose that bill." Then I stopped. Tessa took over, exactly as planned. She explained that the serial number corresponded to an old parcel reference and boundary correction file. She placed the courthouse index page beside the missing checkout card. That file was removed from county records years ago and not returned, she said. The signature belongs to Nola Kettner. My father shifted. "That doesn't prove anything," he snapped. Tessa nodded. "Alone? No. That is why we brought the rest." She laid out the old map and the independent survey report. She explained the access strip in simple words, so no one could hide behind technical language. The disputed correction had moved road access away from the North Orchard house and toward land connected to Linegate Holdings. Harlan Voss's survey found no valid deed basis for that change. Blythe Caro's statement confirmed that Grandpa had questioned the correction years earlier, and that the original file would have contained the notes needed to review it. Callum's face had gone red. Drex leaned forward and picked up the Linegate filing before his lawyer could stop him. His eyes moved over the contact email. Then he looked at Callum with a flat, poisonous calm. "You told me this was clean," he said. Callum opened his mouth, but nothing useful came out. Then Tessa placed the insurance documents on the table. The barn fire claim, the equipment list, the photographs showing the same equipment sold before the fire, Jonas Pelham's preliminary report, the payment trail toward accounts connected to repairs that were not repairs at all. "A referral has been made to the state insurance fraud unit," Tessa said. "And a civil petition has already been filed to pause any transfer, sale, or development action connected to the disputed access until the title question is reviewed." She placed the court-stamped page in the center of the table. That was the moment my father understood the meeting had not been a negotiation. It had become notice. He stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "This is insane," he said. She's twisting old papers because she wants attention. The words sounded familiar because he had used them in smaller ways my whole life. Quiet girls wanted attention when they finally spoke. Records were old papers when they told the wrong truth. Grandpa was confused when his memory became inconvenient. Tessa did not raise her voice. Mr. Kettner, I would advise you not to make accusations of fabrication in a room full of documents you have not reviewed with your own counsel. Lyle Fenton put a hand on my father's sleeve and whispered something. My father shook him off. That house is worthless, he said, pointing at me. You hear me? Worthless. Drex laughed once, and it was not friendly. Then why did I spend 18 months paying your son for access to it? That sentence did more damage than any speech I could have made. Maveen began to cry quietly. Callum stared at the table as if he could make the email address disappear by hating it. My father looked at the $10 bill again, and for the first time in my life, I saw him see me without the old filter. Not as his quiet daughter, not as the girl who filed papers, not as the person he could embarrass into obedience. He saw the person holding the line he had tried to erase. What did you do? He asked. His voice was lower now, smaller. I thought about every time he had laughed at my work, every time he had called Grandpa's house dead, every time he had used family like a rope around my throat. I did not give him anger. I gave him the one sentence Grandpa had earned. I followed the line he left me. We left their papers on the table. I did not sign the deed. I did not accept the money. I did not argue when my father called my name as I reached the door. Tessa walked beside me, her folder tucked under one arm. In the hallway, the courthouse sounds seemed louder than before. Shoes on tile, phones ringing, distant laughter from an office below. Life continuing while a lie finally lost its clean shirt. I paused by the stairwell and looked back through the glass panel. My father was still standing. Callum was bent over his phone, probably calling someone who would not save him. Drex was speaking to Lyle with the controlled anger of a man calculating lawsuits. Maveen had both hands over her mouth. The same room that had laughed at my inheritance now sat around a $10 bill like it was a loaded thing. Stay with me here, because this is the part people misunderstand. They think the big moment is the revenge. It is not. The big moment is only the turn. The actual reckoning comes later, slowly, through filings, hearings, interviews, and bills from professionals who charge by the hour. It came through a judge who granted a temporary order stopping any transfer tied to the disputed access. It came through a title review that forced old maps and newer filings into the same light. It came through the insurance unit asking questions my father did not want to answer. It came through Drex Halverson backing away from the development and then turning on Callum when he realized the access problem had been hidden from him. It came through Lingate Holdings being named in more documents than Callum could explain. Nothing happened in one clean, dramatic strike. But everything started moving in a direction my father could not shout back into place. Months passed. The town talked, because small towns do not know how not to talk. At first, some people believed my father. They said grief had made me difficult. They said Grandpa had always been odd. They said land records were complicated. Then the court filings became public enough for facts to travel. The diner changed its tone. People who had looked away from me began nodding too hard in the grocery store. I did not enjoy that part. Public sympathy can feel almost as invasive as public shame. I kept working. I kept the house insured. I paid what I had to pay. I learned the difference between a title action and an insurance investigation. I learned that justice has a calendar of its own and does not care how tired you are. The final legal result was not a fairy tale, but it was real. The disputed boundary correction was challenged, and the court recognized enough problems to keep the access frozen while the title was corrected through settlement. Drex abandoned the Red Glass Cabin project and sued Callum and Linnegate for misrepresentation. Callum lost investors, money, and the shining future my father had always polished for him. The insurance matter did not put my father in handcuffs in the middle of Main Street like people imagine in stories, but it did become serious. There were interviews, penalties, repayment demands, and a referral that followed him like a shadow. He also faced civil claims tied to the false filings and the damage caused by the attempted transfer. By the time the legal dust settled, Nola Kettner still had his loud voice, but fewer rooms welcomed it. That may sound small to some people. It did not feel small to him. As for me, I kept the North Orchard house. The first repair I made was the porch, because I wanted to stand on it without feeling the boards bend under my feet. I hired a roofer with money from a small settlement connected to the title claim, then painted the front door a deep green Grandpa would have pretended not to like. I cleared the cellar. I saved the metal seed box. I left the old wall clock exactly where it was. In spring, I planted 6 new apple trees behind the house, not enough to bring the orchard back, but enough to tell the land someone had stopped calling it dead. Rhett Calder, the old neighbor who had later given a statement about trucks near the barn before the fire, came by with fence posts and terrible jokes. Blythe Caro brought copies of old county maps for me to frame. Jonas Pelham sent one short email after the insurance case closed. Your grandfather built a careful file. You honored it. I printed that too. The room that had been Grandpa's office became something else. I put in 2 tables, a scanner, shelves, and a sign by the door that read, The Nola Kettner Reading Room. On Sunday afternoons, I opened it for older people in Red Glass who needed help reading deeds, tax bills, insurance letters, medical forms, and contracts their families told them were too complicated. The first week, 3 people came. The second week, 9. By the end of the first month, I had a waiting list and a coffee pot that never rested. I taught people to keep copies, to ask for the first version, to read every line before signing, and to understand that shame is often used to rush people past the truth. I never told them my whole story unless they asked. Most did not need the details. They understood the lesson. My father drove by once after the house was painted. He did not stop. I saw his truck slow near the mailbox, then continue down Orchard Line Road toward land that no longer opened for him. I felt less than I expected. Not forgiveness exactly, not hatred either. More like the quiet feeling you get after closing a file that took too long to finish. Some people want their parents to admit the truth in words. I do not think Nola Kettner will ever give me that. But he gave me something else in that final meeting without meaning to. When he looked at the $10 bill and asked what I had done, he admitted, for one breath, that I had done something he could not undo. For a man like my father, that was as close to confession as I was likely to get. I keep the $10 bill in a frame now, not because it made me rich, and not because it bought me anything. It hangs beside Grandpa's old survey map in the reading room. People notice it sometimes and ask why a $10 bill is framed like a diploma. I tell them it was my grandfather's last lesson. Cheap things can carry expensive truths. Small numbers can open large doors. And land, if you know how to read it, tells the truth longer than people do. My dad laughed when I inherited Grandpa's old house. He laughed because he saw peeling paint, broken steps, and a bill too small to respect. He never understood that my grandfather did not leave me a house because it was easy to keep. He left it because it was hard to steal from someone who knew where the real line was. That is my story. An old house, a $10 bill, and a quiet grandfather who trusted the quietest person in the family to notice what everyone else wanted gone. If someone in your life has ever been treated like they were too small to matter, send them this story. They may need the reminder. The loudest people do not always own the truth. Sometimes the truth is sitting in a drawer, waiting in a courthouse, folded behind a clock, or written in a number nobody bothered to read. And sometimes the person they laugh at is the only one patient enough to find it. The end, commentary, lesson, and explanation. Now that we have heard Nola Kettner's full story, let's slow down and really talk about what happened here. Because this story is not only about an old house, it is not only about a $10 bill, and it is not only about a father who laughed too early. This story is really about attention, patience, family power, hidden truth, and the quiet strength of a person who has been underestimated for too long. When we look at Nola's journey, we can see that the biggest weapon in this story was not anger. It was not shouting. It was not revenge in the dramatic way people usually imagine. The real weapon was careful observation. Nola won because she noticed what everyone else ignored. At the beginning, the story gives us a very painful scene. Nola is sitting in a lawyer's office after her grandfather's death. That moment should have been serious. It should have been respectful. A family member had passed away, but instead of respect, she gets laughter. Her father, Brant, laughs when he hears that she has inherited the old North Orchard house and a single $10 bill. Think about how cruel that is. This is not a stranger laughing at her. This is her own father. He does not even wait until they leave the office. He laughs in front of everyone. He turns her inheritance into a joke. He wants the whole room to see her as the loser of the family. And this is important because public humiliation is not just about words. Public humiliation is a way of control. Brant wants Nola to feel small. He wants her to feel foolish. He wants her to accept the story he is creating, that she received nothing valuable, that her grandfather was confused, and that she is not smart enough to understand property or money. That is why he laughs. Laughter can be used like a weapon when it is meant to make someone doubt themselves. But Nola does something very powerful. She does not fight in that moment. She does not try to prove herself right. She simply takes the envelope, stays calm, and leaves with the one thing everyone else has dismissed. This is our first lesson. Sometimes you do not need to answer an insult immediately. Sometimes, if you answer too fast, you enter the fight on the other person's terms. Brant wanted noise. He wanted Nola to become emotional so he could say, "See? She is unstable. She is dramatic. She does not know what she is doing." But Nola does not give him that. She keeps her face steady. She takes the bill. She gives herself time. That is a very mature kind of strength. Many people think strength looks like a loud comeback. But in this story, strength looks like silence, patience, and a clear mind. Now let's talk about Grandpa Orrin. Even though he is not alive during the main action of the story, he is one of the strongest characters. His presence is everywhere. We see him in the house. We see him in the maps. We see him in the $10 bill. We see him in the way Nola thinks. Orrin was not just leaving property behind. He was leaving a path. He knew the family would laugh at the old house. He knew Brant would try to make Nola feel foolish. He also knew Nola was the only person who had the patience to follow a quiet clue. That shows us the deep emotional bond between Nola and her grandfather. He did not choose her because she was the loudest. He chose her because she listened. One of the most beautiful ideas in this story is Grandpa's lesson. Land tells the truth longer than people do. That line is simple, but it carries the heart of the whole story. People can lie. People can perform. People can change stories. People can call something worthless when they secretly need it. But records, maps, boundaries, signatures, dates, and old files can hold the truth for years. Orrin understood that. He knew that if he only accused his son while he was alive, Brant could deny it. The family could say he was old, confused, bitter, or emotional. But if Orrin left documents, numbers, maps, and proof, then the truth would not depend on anyone's opinion. It would stand on paper. That takes us to the $10 bill. On the surface, it looks small. It looks almost insulting. A $10 bill is not an inheritance that changes someone's life. At least, not in the normal way. But in this story, the bill becomes a key. Not a magic key, but an intellectual key. It works only because Nola remembers what her grandfather taught her. The serial number points her toward an old land file, a missing county record, and eventually the truth about a false boundary correction. This is a very important story device because it tells us something powerful. Value is not always visible to careless people. Brant sees $10. Nola sees a code. Brant sees a junk house. Nola sees a question. Brant sees an easy victim. Grandpa saw the one person who could finish the work. The old house also has a deeper meaning. The North Orchard house is not just a building. It is a symbol. To Brant, it is a problem. To Callum, it is an obstacle. To the developer, it is a piece of access. To Maveen, it is something that must be managed and removed. But to Nola, it is memory, truth, and responsibility. The house looks weak from the outside, just like Nola looks weak to her family. The porch leans. The paint is old. The barn is gone. But inside, the house is organized. It is holding clues. It is not dead. It is waiting. That is very similar to Nola herself. Her family thinks she is quiet and ordinary, but inside, she is sharp, observant, and strong enough to carry a difficult truth. This is one of the strongest emotional parallels in the story. The house and Nola are both underestimated. The family misjudges both of them because they only look at the surface. That is a major life lesson. Some people only respect things that look powerful immediately. Big money, loud confidence, fancy titles, expensive property. But real value is often quieter than that. It can be hidden in discipline, memory, patience, and character. The person who looks simple may be the one who understands the whole system. The old house that looks worthless may be holding the legal line that stops a huge fraud. Now let's look at Brant as a father. He is not just greedy. He is controlling. His main method is emotional pressure. First he laughs, then he acts concerned. Then he tries to rush Nola into selling. Then he shames her publicly at the diner. Then he says she is confused and manipulated by grief. This is a pattern. When he thinks she is weak, he mocks her. When he thinks she might know something, he becomes soft and worried. When she still does not obey, he becomes threatening. That is how controlling people often work. They change their tone, but the goal stays the same. They want control. And notice this. Brant never really asks what Grandpa wanted. He never asks why Orrin left the house to Nola. He never shows respect for the dead man's decision. He only wants the result changed. That tells us a lot. When someone says they care about family but ignores the truth, they may not be protecting family at all. They may be protecting their own benefit. Brant uses words like peace, family, and clean start, but those words are just covers. He wants Nola to sign away the one thing that can expose him. That is why he is in such a hurry. His urgency reveals his fear. Callum's role is also important. He is the golden son. He has been treated like the one who understands business and success. But when the truth comes out, we see that much of his confidence is built on his father's manipulation and hidden deals. He talks down to Nola because he has learned to see her as less important. But he is not actually stronger than her. He just has more family support. This is another lesson. Being favored is not the same as being capable. Some people look successful because others have cleared the path for them. But when real pressure comes, character is revealed. Maveen is more complicated. She is not the main villain, but she supports the system. She uses soft words. She brings food. She cries. She says Brant is still Nola's father. She tries to turn accountability into cruelty. This is something we should pay attention to. Sometimes the people around a wrongdoer do not commit the main act, but they help protect it. They ask the victim to be quiet for the sake of peace. They ask the person who found the truth to carry the burden of everyone else's comfort. Maveen's fear may be real, but her fear does not erase what happened. Sympathy is not the same as surrender. Nola can feel sorry for her and still continue. One of the most powerful parts of the story is when Nola gets publicly shamed at the diner. Her father tries to destroy her reputation before she can expose him. He says grief has made her strange. He suggests Grandpa was confused. He makes Nola look unstable in front of people. This is a very realistic move. When someone fears the truth, they often attack the credibility of the person holding it. If they can make others doubt Nola, they do not have to answer the documents. But again, Nola does not explode. She writes everything down. This may look small, but it is huge. She turns humiliation into evidence. She takes a painful moment and makes it part of the record. That gives us another life lesson. When someone tries to rewrite reality, keep your own record. Write down dates. Save messages. Keep copies. Do not trust memory alone when people around you are skilled at denial. This does not mean we should live with suspicion all the time. But when a situation becomes serious, documentation protects the truth. Nola's job with records becomes her life skill. The very thing her father mocked becomes the thing that saves her. The legal part of the story is also very important because it keeps the revenge realistic. Nola does not just find one dramatic clue and destroy everyone overnight. She gets help. She talks to Tessa Rookland, an attorney. She speaks with Blythe Caro, the retired recorder. She works with Jonas Pelham, the insurance investigator. This shows maturity. Nola understands that truth needs structure. A person can have the truth and still lose if they do not present it correctly. That is why expert help matters. The story teaches us that justice often needs patience, guidance, and proper process. Tessa's role is especially strong because she does not overpromise. She tells Nola that this will not be fast. She explains the legal routes carefully. This makes the story feel grounded. Real justice is often slow. It involves petitions, referrals, title reviews, court orders, and evidence. It is not always exciting. It can be expensive and exhausting. But that does not make it weak. In fact, slow justice can be powerful because it builds on facts instead of emotions. Brant's strength is performance. Nola's strength is process. And process wins because it does not care how loud Brant is. Let's also talk about the barn fire twist. This part changes the story from a simple inheritance conflict into a bigger pattern of fraud. The barn fire was not just a sad family accident. It was connected to an insurance claim, missing records, and equipment that may not have been destroyed at all. This twist works because it adds layers. Brant did not only want land. He had been building a whole false version of events. The fire helped hide records. The missing county file helped hide the original boundary. The false boundary helped create access for development. The development deal helped Callum and Brant. Everything connects. That is what makes the story satisfying. The truth is not random. It is a chain. And this chain shows us another lesson. When something does not make sense, ask what someone gains from it. Why did Brant want the house sold so quickly? Why did he call it worthless, but keep pushing for a buyer? Why was the county file missing? Why was the barn fire so convenient? Why was the developer involved? Nola keeps asking simple questions. Simple questions can be dangerous to dishonest people, because lies often depend on nobody checking the basics. The climax in the attorney's office is powerful because it mirrors the beginning. In the first office scene, Nola is alone and mocked. In the final office scene, she comes prepared with her attorney and documents. Same kind of table, same kind of pressure, same family. But the power has shifted. At the start, Brant controls the story. At the end, the documents control the room. This is why the final meeting feels so satisfying. Nola does not need to become cruel. She does not need to insult them back. She simply places the proof on the table. That is the best kind of reversal in a calm revenge story. The same people who laughed now have to sit in silence. The $10 bill on top of the packet is a beautiful image. At the beginning, it was treated like a joke. At the climax, it becomes the symbol of exposure. Nola tells her father, "You laughed because Grandpa left me $10. You should have asked why he chose that bill." That line works because it shows the difference between careless thinking and careful thinking. Brant saw the amount. Nola saw the choice. Brant saw money. Nola saw meaning. The truth was not hidden from everyone. It was hidden from people who did not respect small things. When Drex, the developer, turns on Callum, we see another important truth. Greedy partnerships often look strong until risk appears. Drex is not loyal to the family. He is loyal to the deal. Once the deal becomes dangerous, he protects himself. Callum thought he was part of a powerful plan. But when the documents come out, he becomes a liability. This is another life lesson. Dishonest success is fragile. It can look impressive from the outside, but it depends on silence, speed, and fear. Once the truth slows it down, it starts breaking apart. The ending is not a fantasy ending, and that is good. Brant is not dragged away in a dramatic scene. Callum does not disappear in one day. The legal process takes months. The development deal freezes. The title issue gets reviewed. The insurance case brings penalties and serious consequences. The family name suffers. This feels more real because many real victories are not clean or instant. Sometimes justice is not one big moment. Sometimes justice is a long line of smaller results that slowly remove power from the person who abused it. Nola's final choice is what gives the story its emotional peace. She keeps the house. She repairs it. She plants apple trees. She turns Grandpa's office into the Nola Kettner reading room. This is not only revenge, this is restoration. She does not let the house remain only a crime scene or a symbol of betrayal. She turns it into something useful for the community. That is a beautiful ending because it shows that justice should not only punish wrong. It should also protect others. Nola uses what she learned to help people read contracts, deeds, insurance papers, and tax bills. She takes her pain and makes it service. That may be the biggest lesson of the whole story. The best revenge is not always watching someone fall. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming the person they said you could never be, and then using your strength to help others. Nola does not become loud like her father. She does not become greedy like Callum. She does not become fake soft like Maveen. She becomes more fully herself. Careful, patient, clear, useful, strong. So what can we learn from Nola's story? We learn that being underestimated can become protection. If people think you are not paying attention, they may reveal more than they should. We learn that small clues matter. A $10 bill, a missing file card, an old map, a strange text message. A repeated word like worthless or burden can tell us more than a long speech. We learn that family pressure is not always love. Sometimes people use family language to hide selfish motives. We learn that truth needs patience, and we learn that silence is not weakness when it is used with purpose. We also learn to respect the people who show up quietly. Grandpa trusted Nola because she had been present. She listened. She remembered. She cared when there was no reward. That kind of love is often invisible while it is happening, but it builds deep trust. Oren did not leave the truth to the loudest person or the richest person. He left it to the person who had proven, over years, that she could pay attention. That is a powerful message. In life, people may not always clap for your quiet loyalty, but the right person may see it. And sometimes being trusted is worth more than being praised. This story also warns us about rushing. Brant's biggest mistake was speed. He wanted Nola to sell fast. He wanted the house gone fast. He wanted papers signed before she could think. That is often how manipulation works. Decide now. Don't overthink. Be smart. Take the deal. Do it for the family. When someone is pushing you to sign, sell, agree, forgive, or stay quiet too quickly, that pressure itself is information. Nola's simple decision to slow down changed everything. Another lesson is that you should never let people define the value of what was left to you. Maybe it is an old house. Maybe it is a skill. Maybe it is a memory. Maybe it is a habit your grandfather taught you. Maybe it is your ability to read carefully, listen deeply, or stay calm under pressure. Other people may laugh because they cannot see value in it, but their blindness does not make it worthless. Nola's father laughed at the house because he wanted her to believe it had no value. The truth was the opposite. He needed her to believe it was worthless because it was powerful. And finally, this story reminds us that truth is patient. Lies often need speed. Lies need panic. Lies need people to sign before reading. Lies need public shame and emotional pressure. Truth can wait in a drawer. Truth can sit in a county basement. Truth can hide behind a clock. Truth can live inside a number on a $10 bill. It does not become less true because people laugh at it. It only needs someone willing to look closely. So, when we look back at the full story, Nola did not win because she became someone else. She won because she trusted the part of herself that her family mocked. Her father mocked her quiet nature. Her brother mocked her lack of business experience. Her stepmother treated her like someone who could be softened and moved. But the very qualities they dismissed were the qualities that solved the mystery. She was careful. She was patient. She knew records. She respected small details. She did not need the loudest voice in the room because she had the clearest evidence on the table. That is why this story feels satisfying. It is not just about Brant being exposed. It is about Nola finally being seen correctly. The old house was not junk. The $10 bill was not a joke. Grandpa was not confused. And Nola was never weak. She was simply waiting for the truth to catch up with the people who laughed. At the end, the framed $10 bill becomes more than a clue. It becomes a lesson on the wall. It tells everyone who walks into that reading room that small things can carry big truths. It tells us to slow down, read carefully, and never let a loud person rush us away from what matters. And maybe that is the best way to understand this story. Nola did not destroy her family. She uncovered what had already been broken. Then she took what was left, repaired the house, planted new trees, and opened the door for others. That is not only revenge. That is wisdom. That is healing. And that is the kind of ending that stays with us.